We turn now to the top Democrat on the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party. That's Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi. He's in Illinois. Good morning to you. I want to get straight to it. You heard from the Secretary of State this week that the State Department is going to work with Homeland Security to aggressively revoke visas for Chinese students, including those with connections to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in critical fields. There are like 300,000 Chinese students with visas in this country. The U.S. government already has a heightened level of vetting. What's going to change?
We currently have 300,000 Chinese nationals in our country on student visas. There's no reason that we should be doing this. I don't recall back during the Cold War handing out hundreds of thousands of visas to the Soviet Union. The Chinese passed a national security law in 2017 stating that all citizens, no matter where they are, must be part of the intel gathering process and feed back that information to the CCP, not to mention the scholarship program that the CCP has set up. And part of that requirement for those students to get those scholarships is they have to have loyalty to the CCP, and they also have to have a certain field of study that is going to benefit the Chinese Communist Party and the nation of China writ large.
I filed a bill yesterday to deny now student visas to Chinese students because China has just passed a law that now requires every national to gather intelligence, including Chinese students here studying, gather intelligence and report back. How do we not pass a law that prevents student visas in that respect? I mean, in the past few years, we've had an explosion of Chinese students that were caught gathering evidence or gathering information on military bases, on college campuses. How do we as lawmakers, policymakers, not do that?
Why we are doing this to ourselves, I'm not exactly sure, but I do have a piece of legislation, one of the first ones I introduced, actually announced on this program, to stop this. We have to stop this because it's harming us. And universities, look, they can love foreign money if they want. I love the American people, and that's where my interests lie in the end of the day.
I don't know. There's not enough details, but what it looks like is they're targeting all people of Chinese origin who are on international student visas, because he's not limiting it to just people who might have ties to the Chinese Communist Party. And if they do have those ties, they don't belong here, especially if they're committing nefarious acts.
The Trump administration just announced that they will aggressively revoke visas for Chinese students. Now, if you're like me, when you heard this headline, you wondered, what is going on here? Did Trump just wake up one day and decide he hates Chinese students? Well, the 61-word official announcement from the Secretary of State wasn't helpful. Much of the media wasn't helpful either. New York Times lists all of the arguments against Trump's action, but none of the arguments for it. So why is Trump doing this? Well, here's what I found. In 2017, China passed the National Intelligence Law. It states any organization or citizen shall support, assist, and cooperate with the state intelligence work in accordance with the law. This means that any Chinese citizen, including one doing research at American universities, can be forced to give information to the Chinese government. Now, you might be wondering, does anything like this actually happen? Check this out. In 2019, a Chinese medical student at a Harvard-affiliated medical center was arrested for attempting to smuggle 21 vials of biological research to China. In 2021, the former chair of Harvard's chemistry department was arrested for lying about his involvement with China's 1,000 Talents Plan and failing to report income received from Chinese institutions. In the early 2000s, a Chinese PhD student at Duke accessed a lab working on invisibility cloak technology. And then he reproduced a near identical version in China, and now he's a billionaire and known as China's Elon Musk. So yeah, it does happen. We had 277,000 Chinese students studying in America last year. Less than 25% of Chinese grad students intend to immigrate to the United States post-graduation. Now, the vast majority of these students probably just want to get a great education and have a good life, not overthrow America. But what's the bigger concern? Well, at best, Chinese students are coming to America, doing advanced research with American taxpayer money, and then can be forced to give that information to Chinese intelligence agencies. At worst, Chinese spies are being sent by the Chinese Communist Party to America to steal research. Now, in either case, this probably only applies to a small minority of Chinese students. And you might not buy either argument at all. but at least you know what the arguments are rather than just getting one side of the story. But here's the thing. I had to look through several articles and do a deep dive just to understand why Trump is doing this. But who has the time for that? And while the Trump administration is giving 61-word announcements with no rationale for their actions, the mainstream media is filling in the gap with the worst possible interpretation. And this is the Achilles heel of a Trump administration. So often, they're trying to do the right thing, but with the wrong messaging. Many people will have just seen the headline, seen no further justification, assumed this is just racism, and moved on. Many innocent Chinese students think they're just getting attacked for no reason and don't know what their own government is doing. And that's a real shame. What leaders do matters, but how they talk about it matters too. And when a public servant does something, the public should always be able to easily understand why. But one thing we, the people, can do is try to seek out both sides of the argument, because the media feeds on bias. And if you don't know the arguments against your bias, the media will use your bias against you.
However, this appears to be much broader, and it's terribly misguided, and it appears prejudicial and discriminatory. My own father came here on an international student visa, and I believe that these people are vital for our economy and for entrepreneurship in this country, and I think this is going to harm America more than help.
Ladies and gentlemen, or better yet, patriots who value America first, let's talk about what's really going on with the Trump administration's decision to revoke Chinese student visas. 61 words from Secretary of State Marco Rubio sparked a firestorm. Visas for Chinese students, especially those tied to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in critical fields, will be aggressively revoked. But what do you make of this? And more importantly, what do you think about the deafening silence from the White House and the media's gleeful rush to paint this as proof of President Trump's so-called racism? Let's start with the policy itself. The Trump administration says it's about national security, protecting our universities, our research, and our technological edge from potential espionage by the Chinese Communist Party. Nearly 300,000 Chinese students study in the U.S., many in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, fields vital to our military and economic dominance. Some, according to the FBI, have been linked to economic espionage, with 80% of such cases tied to China. The administration argues that students with CCP connections or those in sensitive fields could be a pipeline for intellectual property theft, feeding China's military-industrial complex. Sounds like a legitimate concern, right? So why isn't the White House shouting this from the rooftops, laying out the evidence to shut down the critics? But what do you all think? When China's new law forces every Chinese national, including 300,000 students on our campuses, to report intelligence to the Communist Party, should we keep rolling out the welcome mat? Senator Ashley Moody says no, with a bill to block those visas. Rapprochion's Riley Moore stands firm. Universities can chase foreign cash, but I love the American people. Is this about protecting our nation? Or are we letting fear override fairness? Here's where it gets murky. The White House has been tight-lipped, offering little beyond Rubio's brief statement. No press conferences, no detailed reports, no clear definition of critical fields, or what CCP connections mean. This isn't new. Trump's team has always played it close to the chest, trusting their base to get the bigger picture. But doesn't that leave the door wide open for the media to pounce? And pounce they have. The New York Times calls it heavy-handed and counterproductive. The Los Angeles Times quotes critics labeling it xenophobic. Posts on X scream it's prejudicial and discriminatory. The media's chomping at the bit, filling the silence with their favorite narrative. Trump hates Asians. Sound familiar? But let's pause and ask, is this really about race? Or is the media doing what they always do? Twisting a policy they don't like into a smear campaign. They've got their script ready. Trump's a racist, and any move against China proves it. Never mind that China's government, not its people, is the target. Never mind that the CCP's own spokesperson, Lin Jian, called the policy unjustified, while dodging questions about their own espionage. Never mind that even some Democrats, like Raja Krishnamurthy, admit the policy might be terribly misguided, but don't outright deny the security risks. Why is the media so eager to cry racism instead of digging into the FBI's data or China's track record? Now, I'm not saying the policy's perfect. Broad strokes like this could hit innocent students, kids who just want an education, not a spy badge. And yeah, the lack of clarity from the White House makes it easier for the media to spin their tale. But here's the real question for you. Is this about protecting America from a real threat? Or is it another case of Trump being sloppy with optics, handing the left a gift-wrapped chance to scream bigot? And why do you think the media is so quick to jump to that conclusion, ignoring the national security angle entirely? You know the left's playbook. Control the narrative, weaponize identity, and drown out debate. They're betting you'll buy their spin without questioning it. But you're smarter than that. You see through the noise. So tell me, what's your take? Is Trump's team dropping the ball on explaining a necessary policy, or is this just another witch hunt from a media desperate to tear him down? And how should we push back when the racism card gets played before the facts even hit the table?
You said if someone has ties to the Chinese Communist Party, they shouldn't be here. Does that mean all the students who are children of leaders, for example, Xi Jinping's own daughter, shouldn't have been allowed here?
Well, if they were engaged in nefarious activities and if they are somehow deeply connected to the CCP, I think that we should be very careful. But in this particular case, they're not only going after people who might fall in that category, but it's anybody who is from China, including Hong Kong, by the way, where people are actually persecuted for various freedoms they're trying to exercise and who come here seeking to exercise those freedoms. So this is a terribly misguided policy.
The Biden administration did conduct heightened vetting, as you know, of Chinese students. Do you think that there is a legitimate argument for expanding this, that certain areas should just be off limits?
I think that you should definitely have heightened vetting, especially in certain critical areas, because we know that the CCP tries to steal, for instance, intellectual property or worse. But the way that this is currently structured looks very, very suspicious. And you have to remember that the people that are cheering for this policy, what Marco Rubio had called for, is the Chinese Communist Party. Why? Because they want these people back. They want the scientists and the entrepreneurs and the engineers who can come and help their economy. And so we are probably helping them as well as other countries more than helping ourselves with this policy.
The defense secretary is traveling in Asia right now, and he said in a Defense Forum speech that Beijing is, quote, concretely and credibly preparing to use military force. He said their military is rehearsing. Take a listen.
Any attempt by Communist China to conquer Taiwan by force would result in devastating consequences for the Indo-Pacific and the world. There's no reason to sugarcoat it. The threat China poses is real, and it could be imminent.
He did not say what the consequences would be. Are you encouraged by what appears to be a statement of support for allies?
I am. I think what he's saying is largely correct, but I think the problem is at the same time he says that, either Donald Trump or even him or others say other things that push away our friends, partners, and allies in the region and cause confusion. And so we need to be consistent and thoughtful with regard to our statements, and we need to be also very methodical about our actions in trying to curb military aggression by the Chinese Communist Party in the South China Sea and with regard to Taiwan.
Recently, the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the Russian-Ukraine war is a proxy war between nuclear powers and needs to be ended. And meanwhile, the United States is selling more arms to this region and setting up more military bases in the Philippines. So, if the proxy war in Europe needs to be ended, are you concerned that a proxy war in Asia might be launched? Thank you.
Now, to our Chinese interlocutors, I shall address you collectively. And thank you for the propaganda spills disguised as questions. Unfortunately, in my personal opinion, the fact that the question was asked in the way it does, it engenders a deficit of trust in China's words vis-a-vis its actions. I just look back to 1995 on a place called Mischief Reef. There were a few bamboo structures erected there, and China said that these were temporary havens for fisherfolk. Now you have an artificial military island, heavily militarized. China says that it has peaceful intentions. Why does it continue to deny the Philippines its rightful provenance under international law and UNCLOS? And as proof of this, we do not stand alone. None have agreed with China, and none has condemned the Philippines for standing up against China in the face of a threat to its territorial integrity and sovereignty. And thus, for dialogue to be effective, it must be coupled with trust. And China has a lot of trust building to do to be an effective negotiating partner in dispute settlement. We have to call a spade a spade. And that's what we see, and that is the biggest stumbling block to dispute resolution or dialogue with China.
Trump's China policy, as it's shaping up in 2025, is undeniably hardline, reflecting a broader distrust rooted in years of trade imbalances, national security concerns, and geopolitical tensions. His administration, with figures like Marco Rubio as Secretary of State and Pete Hegseth as Defense Secretary, is doubling down on confronting China head-on. Rubio's move to aggressively revoke Chinese student visas, announced in late May 2025, signals a crackdown on potential espionage risks in academia, particularly in sensitive tech fields. Hegseth, meanwhile, has been vocal at forums like the Shangri-La Dialogue, warning that China's military is rehearsing for the real deal with Taiwan and urging Asian allies to boost defense spending to counter Beijing's ambitions. These actions align with Trump's rhetoric, evident in his recent accusations of China violating trade agreements and his "no more Mr. Nice Guy" stance that prioritizes American sovereignty and security over diplomatic niceties. The sentiment you express, distrust in China and a demand for bluntness, echoes what's circulating among Trump's base. Posts on X highlight this, with users praising Trump for calling China an adversary that cheats and steals, and for pushing to break U.S. dependence on Chinese tech like semiconductors. This reflects a broader public frustration with decades of perceived exploitation by Beijing, from intellectual property theft to strategic land purchases near U.S. military bases. Trump's executive actions, like banning Chinese investment in critical industries, underscore this pivot toward economic and military self-reliance. Now, about Margaret Brennan and CBS's Face the Nation, your concern about twist and spin isn't baseless. Mainstream outlets often frame Trump's policies in ways that can feel like they're softening the edges or pushing a narrative. On the June 1st, 2025 episode, Brennan pressed Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on whether the administration was intentionally escalating tensions with China, citing Rubio's visa revocations and Hegseth's Taiwan warnings. Bessent pushed back, framing the moves as a response to China's unreliability during COVID and beyond, not as provocation. The exchange shows how media can angle questions to imply recklessness, even when the administration sees itself as reacting to clear threats. That said, Brennan's job is to probe, and her line of questioning reflects a broader establishment skepticism about rapid escalation with a global superpower. But let's call a spade, as you put it. China's actions, naval exercises in the South China Sea, economic coercion, and a military buildup aimed at Taiwan aren't exactly trust-building. Beijing's foreign ministry has fired back, accusing Hegseth of saber-rattling and sowing division, which suggests they're feeling the pressure. Meanwhile, Trump's team isn't backing down, with plans for direct talks between Trump and Xi Jinping to hash out trade disputes, though no firm timeline exists. The administration's focus on streamlining the State Department under Rubio to prioritize America First goals, including curbing immigration and countering China's influence, shows they're gearing up for a long game. On the flip side, critics argue this approach risks economic fallout. China's a massive trade partner, and tariffs or severed ties could spike costs for American consumers. There's also the question of whether isolating China pushes it closer to allies like Russia or North Korea, complicating global stability. Still, the mandate you're pointing to, keeping America safe, seems to be the driving force here. And Trump's team is betting that a show of strength now prevents bigger problems later. So, is this effective dialogue? If by that you mean standing firm, projecting power, and refusing to sugarcoat China's threat, then yeah, Trump, Rubio, and Hegseth are delivering on that front. They're not here to play nice or trust blindly, and that's resonating with voters who see China as a clear and present danger. Whether the media spins it or not, the policy is unapologetic. But keep an eye on how this unfolds. Escalation's a tightrope, and the stakes couldn't be higher.
Since you track U.S. intelligence, I wanted to ask you if you have any insight into what appears to be the swarm of Ukrainian drones that has destroyed 40 Russian military aircraft deep inside Russian territory overnight. Sources are telling our Jennifer Jacobs that the White House wasn't aware that this attack was planned. What can you tell us about the level of U.S. intelligence sharing with Ukraine right now and helping them with their targets?
I don't want to get into classified information, but what I can say is that it's a little bit more strained in light of what Donald Trump has said recently. The one thing that I can also say is that Trump was right the other day to say that Putin is crazy in the way that he's going after civilian areas in Ukraine repeatedly. And so the Ukrainians are striking back. At the end of the day, the only way that we can bring these hostilities to an end is by strengthening the hand of the Ukrainians. Trump should, at this point, realize that Putin is playing him and aid the Ukrainians in their battlefield efforts. That's the best way to get to some type of armistice or truce at the negotiating table, sooner rather than later.
All right. Congressman Krishnamurthy, thank you for your insights today.
I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all, okay? We're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all.
President, what do you want to do about that?
I'm surprised. I'm very surprised. We'll see what we're going to do. What am I going to tell you? You're the fake news, aren't you? You're totally fake. All right, any other questions? I don't like what Putin is doing, not even a little bit. He's killing people. And something happened to this guy, and I don't like it.